Hello, welcome, Marlene here. For today's video, we're going to be looking at stencil holders. If you don't already own one, this will help you make the decision as to which would work better for what you do when it comes to cookie decorating. I find the best way to show products is by using them in a tutorial. The complete tutorials to these 3 cookies, you can find those on Patreon. And now let's get started with today's product demonstration. If you decide to order any of these stencil holders following this video, kindly purchase them via the link in my description box. I earn a commission and it doesn't cost you more money, so I really appreciate that. Today we're going to look at stencil holders. I'm going to run through the ones that I own to give you guys an idea of, maybe you'll decide which one you prefer. So here, this one is exactly the size of most stencils. Most stencils are cut at 5.5 by 5.5 squares. There's magnets at the 4 corners, and then you just snap that plastic in there, and you see your stencil is held in there, and then you can kind of position it where you want. The thickness is not the same on both sides of the plastic, so depending on how thick you cut your cookies, you can use it either side. And it says it's not recommended to put it in the sink because these little magnets could fall down the drain. Because I use it to airbrush, it does get very dirty. I kind of just leave it snapped together and run it through the water quickly. It did loosen one of my magnets, which I just crazy glued back into position. So there's that one. The next one, this teal one, this one here you'll find at Michael's. So this one you could probably get with a 50% coupon. And this one is the only one that's adjustable. So you can take the pieces and make your stencil holder the size of your stencil. If you're not using the standard cookie ones, this might be a good option for you. So you just have to snap it together, and the same thing, you just place your stencil and snap that. And again, the 2 thicknesses are different, so one is fatter than the other, so you can use either side. And I do like this here to lift it off the cookie, but I did have it kind of fall apart on occasion as I was using it. So there's this one. And now for the most economical version, here's a cookie sheet, and I'm dropping my magnets on there. And then you could put your cookie in the middle there, and then you would rest your stencil and it would get secured in there, you see? My magnet, is it? Yeah, there it is. See? And then you could use that to kind of hold your stencil in place. So that's kind of the bargain basement version. And then there's a new product on the scene here. This one here. This is probably the sturdier of the designs that I've seen. So this does not come apart. So you have a little area here to put the shape of your cookie. So this would be for positioning while you're working. So you place your paper underneath. It's protected. It'll stay grease free. You put your cookie here, and then you can rest your stencil right there. And then you see the stencil is held into position, and then you have this little handle, and it's got a hinge, and you can just lift up, put your cookie, you know exactly where to put it, put your stencil down. So it's just positioning the paper exactly where you want it to be so that your design lines up every time. And here are the specs to the Stencil Genie. I copy pasted this for you guys. Now I'm going to be demonstrating the Stencil Genie at the end of this coffee cup tutorial. I'm starting off actually with the stencil snap since my stencil is actually on the small side. So you'll get to see the versatility of the stencil snap at the beginning. If you want to watch the complete tutorial to this cookie, you'll find that on Patreon. This video, I'm just showing the excerpts where I'm actually using a stencil holder. Right there. For this cookie, I've decided to use 2 of my stencils. They're kind of small, and I tape them together so the top or the bottom, depending, will have 2 different designs. And I'm going to have to use this stencil holder since it's not a standard size, and I'm going to adjust the layout of this thing so that it can hold my stencil. Let's get the cookie cutter to see if it's going to fit, and yes, it's going to be able to hold the stencil and fit around my cookie, because sometimes that's an issue too. The stencil is too small for the cookie. Some cookies are on the big side. Let's lay our stencil in there, and now we'll be able to comfortably have our stencil in there. So here is the paper that I cut out, and this will protect at the same time as create guidelines for me so that I can come in and airbrush my guides. So I think I'm going to do, let's flip the stencil holder so that it's the narrow side down so that it presses harder on the surface of the cookie. Okay, and now I have my needle tool. I'm going to airbrush this in white. We'll see if it even shows. A light misting from directly above. Let's see if the white shows. Oh, there. See, the thing about this white though, it's giving me an overspray on my actual cookies, which is usually not an issue with these chocolate cookies, but okay, so there it is. Here I made the stencil myself, and I'm writing thanks on the cookies. And you see I'm hitting the top of the cookie there. I'm going to try to see if I can lower the stencil in the holder. Okay, that's better. So I want this dead center, and I designed the stencil so that it wouldn't go too much here on the sides. And that's why it's the size that it is. I didn't want this curving to happen right here. So I'm going to center this and then just royal icing stencil this on there. So the holder is on the narrow edge, but I find it gives a tighter fit. You see it's kind of rocking on there. It's really squished onto the cookie as opposed to above, especially when you're working with royal icing as opposed to airbrush. So I'm just going to get my royal icing. So there it is. I've got like a gunmetal color here, and I'm just going to try to do one pass. I didn't overly mix, that's why it's streaked. And there it is. This is a simple thing, but you see it gets dirty and then you can't see 100% where to get it. But the stencil holder really makes your life easier with regards to picking up the stencil and moving it to the next cookie, as opposed to this floppy thing. And then you can run through your cookies. Now thankfully here it's easy to line up the design on my cup. My last one, I only made 4, resting the stencil there. There. This one here, if you look, it's a bit jagged because I put thicker amount of icing, but it's fine. Now you can come in if you want and just embellish that with some royal icing. Now let's look at the stencil snap. This product is available at Michael's, which means 50% coupon. I've got the specs copied here again for you. If you're ordering it online, be sure to shop around. I saw a wide range of prices, sometimes a $10 difference from one store to the other. This is by far my favorite cookie tutorial here, this champagne bottle. I just love how it turned out. So now on to the product demo / tutorial. I wanted to use this for, you know, to switch it up in the demo, but it's not fitting, the cookie's not fitting in there. I tried to do it this way, but it's not fitting. And so again, the teal one comes to the rescue. You can see the cookie fits in there. So it's not long, the cookies are too big and don't fit inside the stencil holders. So I'm just now adding my guidelines to the cookies so that I can come in and pipe that. I'm not stenciling because the design is very fragile and I don't want to have my thing ripping. So I'm just giving myself a very faint airbrushed guide, and I'm going to pipe these, or else they're going to get just, the stencil is going to get shredded. I'm just resting my stencil and it's shielding the rest of the white to keep it pristine, and just a light misting directly from above. This is the same color I'll be piping in, so if it's exposed, it's not a big deal. You see? And now the final product for today is the Sweet Stencil Holder. This is by far the most robust of the stencil holders. It's made out of a clear acrylic, and this stencil holder has a feature that allows you to kind of blindly decorate, in that once your stencil is kind of gunked up with royal icing, it's usually quite difficult to know where to place your stencil on the cookie. And this has a feature that allows you to place your cookie and always perfectly align your stencil. By the way, if you like that stencil, I'm including the cut your own stencil files with the Patreon post and the complete tutorial. So let's get started with this demo. This is my first time ever using this particular stencil holder, and I'm going to start here. I've traced out my cookie cutter on a piece of paper. I'm removing the one that was in there and I'm replacing it with mine, and I'm just putting my stencil, this is the stencil I'm using to decorate my cookies, and I'm trying to see here. So I'm going to lock it in just to see how to position the guide underneath there. So I think I'm going to have to cut my paper right at the top so that I can tuck it in a bit tighter. My cookie's on the big side. Let's see how that lines up. It's a bit too high. So this initial fiddling, but after it should be good. There's a bit of static. It's sticking because of static. Okay, I've got here, you see my stencil, and you can see the cookie template under there. So I've lined up everything so that it fits nicely. So let's go through this. I've got the paper underneath the protector, so I know exactly where to position my cookie. Then I close this in. We can see where the stencil lines up. This is my own stencil design now. And now I'm using pretty stiff icing, I would say. It's like a lot like spackling consistency, if you've ever spackled. And I've got it here, and I'm just going to run that across the whole thing. My icing is lighter than my base. My base is quite dark, that burgundy. Oh, I'm getting it everywhere. Okay, and now let's just remove . That's about good, I guess. And now I'm using a sea sponge, and I'm dabbing that in gold. And the sea sponge with the stiff icing and then the powdered gold creates like a hammered metal look. I'm just dabbing all that. I think right here is the hat. There. Okay, I think that's good. Let's check this out. I really like how it opens. Okay, and there is the cookie. Let's get the next one in there. I'm just placing it. Now I can't see anything, so we're relying on the holder to have it like be in the good place. And now again with my icing. When you're using very thick icing, it's less susceptible to under smushing, getting under the stencil, but you really have to press it into the small areas or else it doesn't fill the small sections. Okay. And now again with the gold. Okay, let's see. Another good one. And now my final cookie. I only have 3. So we're lining it up. My stencil is, I would not be able to do this without this. I can't see a cotton picking thing. I really can't. And now adding my icing for the last time. It's very pasty now because of, on top of it I'm adding that powder. So it's drying it out even more. I don't know if I should have my icing slightly wetter, but okay. And now let's get our gold on. I'm piping over the congrats, so I'm not worrying too much about there. Okay, let's see. My final cookie. And fantastic. Here are all the stencil holders side by side. The prices here are ranges for you. You should shop around. I did see sometimes a significant difference from one shop to the other. So if you want to get the best deal, you should shop around. Just want to mention, full disclosure, all 3 of these stencil holders were given to me. I did not pay for them. I don't want to give you my final kind of opinion. I want you guys to make your own decision as to which one would work best for you personally. They all have their own kind of pros and cons, so you can make the decision based on your own personal needs. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and that it was helpful. If you'd like to watch any of these tutorials, you'll find them on Patreon. Thanks so much for being here. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads, and I'll see you next time.